This is Change the Narrative, the podcast about innovation in work, life, and culture. I'm your host and tour guide, Michael Hernandez. In this episode, I speak with Erin Huizenga about publishing nonfiction books to support her consulting business. And we spoke about this in an earlier episode too, about how we can use nonfiction books and author them to support our customers as well as to just share ideas. So Erin Huizenga is a learning experience designer with over 20 years dedicated to empowering people and organizations to grow through human-centered learning strategies and design innovation. As founder and CEO of Desklight, Erin partners with organizations such as the Smithsonian, Northwestern, and Techstars to research insights, prototype ideas, and develop breakthrough learning programs. Early in her career, Erin directed strategy teams at renowned innovation consultancies, including IDEO and Gravity Tank. She has coached city leaders in design thinking for Bloomberg Philanthropies and led graduate courses on innovation narratives and social entrepreneurship at the Institute of Design, Illinois Institute of Technology. Erin holds a Master of Education in Instruction Design and Technology, and she recently published Learning in the Wild, a guidebook for professional leaders looking to better implement learning strategies into the workplace. Her unique background spanning design, education, business, and social impact enables Erin to create future-ready, science-backed, and human-centered learning experiences.
Erin Huizenga, it is so great to see you and talk with you about book authoring and publishing. You and I both met in a writers group a couple of years ago when I started writing, and it just goes to show you that those accountability partners can be, professional, part of your network, moving on beyond the book, and we've continued conversations since that first introduction. So another way that the book can open up opportunities for you that aren't necessarily the obvious thing. So again, thank you so much for being part of the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah. So tell me about your first book that you wrote that came out recently. What is it called and what's it about?
Great. Yeah, it's called Learning in the Wild. I'll hold it up here. And it's about, helping people to kind of think beyond the traditional silos of learning, and especially in adult learning circles. And so it's written for adult learning leaders, and just this idea that it's about, equipping them with news they can use like in 5 minutes from now in that next meeting. And so it includes a lot of insights from my own career as a human-centered designer and integrations with instructional design and the future of learning, and things like AR, VR are mentioned in one of the chapters. So it's a comprehensive, kind of handbook you can have at your desk any day and kind of look at it for ongoing inspiration as a learning leader.
That's great. And so this is maybe kind of part of your business. Is that sort of an extension of that, or is this like a separate side project?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely part of Desklight. So Desklight started about 10 years ago, and it's a learning innovation design company. And I wrote it to our clients. It's kind of, as I told you, earlier when we were talking, I wrote it as a love letter to our clients, because I felt like I was sort of writing and talking and, sharing in workshops often about a lot of the concepts that are now in the book. And so I do see it as an extension of Desklight, a way to kind of like give it as a gift to our clients and potential future clients. Have a conversation about it, book club style with the people we'll be working with, and also their team members that could be, that could benefit from reading it even before we all work together. So yeah, it's kind of a neat pre-read to working with Desklight for a number of reasons.
Wow, there's so much in there that I like as a gift to clients. And, I've talked to some folks about needing to, with their business, sort of prepare and educate their clients so they hit the ground running when they start working with you, and they have a better sense of where to begin, what questions to ask, what to be prepared for, things to think about in advance. I really like that as a tool for your business. That's really great. And yeah, we were talking about this before, about thinking about audience, and everybody's coming to this with a different approach and philosophy, and yours is a love letter. And we were talking about my book being sort of like a manifesto, and that sort of reflects my sort of like combative sort of personality that I've got. I'm going to put this out there in the world. And you're like, no, this is a love letter. And so I think it's kind of cool maybe to sort of like, how did you define your book for your audience? And what is this to you? And what is it going to be to them? I think it's a great way to approach a topic. That's really fantastic. And also that it's completely dependent on who you are. It's unique to you. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, I think about it as a love letter, as a pre-read almost, because I want to get Desklight's personality across, and of course my personality across as a founder. And also, working with so many learning leaders over the years, we've come to realize, it's really hard sometimes to understand where an instructional designer and a learning strategy team can come in and be helpful and a good partner to somebody in a C-suite position or an L&D senior level position, or a dean or provost at a higher ed institute, university or college. So, writing to them to say, this is how you can work with a team like ours to benefit from customized learning solutions that really lead with learning as a benefit for the organization. Of course, all of the downstream benefits of earned income, student retention, student recruitment or learner recruitment, depending on, what we're talking about exactly, employee retention, just thinking about those things as more holistic and integral to a professional team success. And so a lot of it is about, from the bottom up, really helping our partners to really understand that and think about it as a holistic relationship moving forward.
Fantastic. And I know that you self-publish your book, so I want to get into that a little bit later about why. And I want to hear about your writing process as well, as someone who's a very busy professional and owner of a business and a mom and all of these things. I do want to get into that, but I'm sort of curious, why did you write a book? And why at this point? You've had this company for 10 years. Why now? Or the book came out about 1.5 years ago, I think. Mm-hmm. And why did you write a book as opposed to publishing blog posts on your website for your company or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do publish a blog on desklightlearning.com, and I was writing quite a bit on LinkedIn, and I started feeling like, when we're all kind of writing very diverse, kind of separate but equal articles in lots of different places, we start to have the same kind of trends in our writing, right? And we start to kind of think about, how to borrow from one article for the sake of building on something new in, the next month or two when you're inspired again to write something else. And so I started feeling like I had stuff in Medium and LinkedIn and on our own website and all over the place, right? And I just desired, somewhat selfishly, to get everything in the same place, but also to build on some of the initial earlier ideas that I had from the first, 5 years of running Desklight. And so I wanted it to be comprehensive. I wanted it to, be more noticeable to our clients and our, future clients. And also, something that our whole team at Desklight can be proud of too, to, get behind. And so that's really the basis of the reasoning around bringing it all together in one place.
Yeah, I think that's really great. And I don't think it's a selfish thing at all. I think it's actually very helpful and efficient to have all those ideas in one place for your clients, but also for you, because I've also have been publishing for years, and in the research of my book, I'm like, I had this idea in the back of my head. Let me write about it. Let me search. Did I write something about this? And I look back on this article that I wrote, 5 or 6 years ago that I had forgotten about. And I'm like, oh yeah, I said that really well over there. So let me put this over here. And I've just forgotten. So I think it's really convenient to kind of coalesce everything in one place and organize it. I think that's really great.
Yeah. Isn't that the best moment when you realize I wrote about that a few years ago and I'm going to build on that now. And I almost had forgotten that I wrote about that. And, it's like art, right? It's like the artistry of building on ideas and continuing to push things forward. And yeah, just quickly to that point, something I had written about on LinkedIn is this concept of the learner's plate. And as a designer, I come from portfolio school. I graduated from a portfolio school. I had a design portfolio. My very first job was a graphic design job. And so I have this bias to entry around, I've always had a portfolio. How could you not have a portfolio when you're interviewing for a job, right? And so I started putting together this concept of the learner's plate as a metaphor for having a portfolio of learning experiences that you can speak to. So the plate idea around, you can have something from French Laundry, which would be like Harvard. And you can have things, that you're making for breakfast in your own house that you love and are, something that your mom used to make for you, that kind of thing. And so the point being, all of them are valuable as long as you can talk about them. And so that is one concept that made its way into a chapter of Learning in the Wild that, I had started in LinkedIn, but it was really fun to add more to the metaphor, to the idea, and really enrich the whole thing a lot more.
Yeah, I love that. I love the metaphors. It's really great for connecting with folks and helping them understand your concepts too. It's really great. Okay, so you were in the writers group we were together in this writers group with several other people coming in and out at different days, depending on what our schedule was like. I think you were coming in once a week, if I remember correctly. And I was struggling to write my first book. And then I popped up and you came in one day and you're like, I'm done. And I'm like, what? You wrote it in like 27 days or something. Like, can you tell me a little bit about your writing process? Like, how long did it take from start to finish? And again, as a very busy professional and mom and partner, how did you find the time to write?
Yeah, I went back and found the Google Doc that I had running with all of my notes when I wrote it. And it took me about 10 months and a week based on my schedule, based on my Google Doc that I just pulled up here. So essentially 10 months from very, very start to very, very finished in terms of the book launch party we had here in Chicago. And so, the process was the very first moment that I really knew I could and should write this book was with you all. And so, in this writing group that I'd been invited to from our mutual friend who I met at South by Southwest EDU in Austin that same year. And we all got together and it became this beautiful accountability group where I thought, well, everybody here is doing the same thing. I could also do this. And I knew that I wanted Learning in the Wild to be lighter weight. It's certainly not the heavy lift that many of you in the group took on. And I wanted it, again, to be this guidebook, this thing that people could they could use right away. And so from there, I believe one person in the group had said, okay, the first thing I did was just to write a real high level outline and then set yourself a schedule. It might change, but accountability to your own schedule kind of thing. And so I did that, I think, the next day after that first writing group. And I was coming every Tuesday, I believe. And so I also kind of mapped out, I'm going to do this by next Tuesday when I come back to the group so I can say I did this thing. So just I think the first step is like the accountability metrics, whatever they are within yourself and within a group that can also keep you accountable, whether it's stated or not stated out loud, right? And so that was one of the first things that I had to figure out. And then, other ways to get it done, pretty quickly was I took 3 or 4 different staycation writer retreats where I just stayed in downtown Chicago, away from my house, away from everyone else, and just took the time to sit in a hotel room and write for as long as I could, for as much as I could in terms of like quality information getting out of my head and into, a computer. And so that helped me a lot too. And then I had a editor / consulting partner who would look at things. And that was another later added layer of accountability that I added in. And I finally, I thought about it as a Desklight project. I gave myself that accountability to say it has to get done. I am my own client. And, I gave myself those deadlines. So those are some, quick things that really helped me to set some metrics around it.
I like that a lot. So that's a great way to like set structure and deadlines and accountability. I think that's huge for many of us. I think everybody to do that. And I like the staycation idea too, just like kind of peeling off and just kind of holding up and doing your thing if you can. Okay, so one of the struggles that I had, and I'm sure a lot of folks have, is a book is a much bigger project than a blog post. And so how did you manage the organization of this giant, massive project, even though your book's not 700 pages, but it's still a pretty big project? How did you organize and figure out how to structure and keep track of everything as you wrote?
Yeah, I started pretty lo-fi where I had Post-it notes on the back of my office door in here. So I just, every time I had an idea or I researched something and I thought, well, that could be an interesting theme for one of the sections, I would just start to kind of map all of those out. And also from the writers group, I think somebody had shared, like, think about it as slow drip content. Like, you like try to just go over the outline again and again and have it in a place that you can look at. So that's why I thought the lo-fi post-its were a good idea initially, just to organize all of the potential chapters, etc. And then, I think also some advice I would put out, and many people talk about this, is don't try to write the intro. Don't try to come up with the title right away, and don't write the summary, but just work on the meat in the book and figure out how it takes on a life of its own, really. And I think that's kind of the beautiful part about writing a book too, is that it becomes yours. And you and I talked about this too, Michael, it's your contribution to the world and to the people who are choosing to take their time to read it. And so how do you serve them well with this thing that you're making? And so just continually kind of massaging it and figuring out, like, where's the stops and starts, and where's the middle, what is it taking on in terms of, it being a song, if you will, or a play. Like, it takes on a life of its own, and just by nature of getting things out and onto a wall, it starts to take a form that really no one expects, which I think is really the beautiful part about being an author.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'm curious about, like, what stage of the process did you have the Post-it notes? Was that before you wrote the outline, or you put the Post-it notes first to figure out what the outline was going to be? What was the timing on that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I did put up the Post-it notes before the outline. So that was the first step, where that was the strategy to come up with what the outline would ultimately look like. And so I told myself I don't want to get anything out and into the computer for at least a month until I had everything sorted on the wall. And then I started putting it into more of a Google Doc outline, because I knew that once I took it back to the computer, I think it's from my design training, my early design training, like, you have to sketch long enough to once you're in the computer, your creativity sort of goes out the window in a lot of ways. So I told myself I have to just wait. And then it became a very linear process after that, less modular and more linear once you get it back into a machine.
Mm-hmm. Would you say, like, listening to what you just said a couple minutes ago about letting it become what it's going to become, like writing a song, did you feel like, even though you had that outline and you dropped it in the computer, that you later on still made some adjustments and rearranging?
Absolutely. Yeah. Pretty big rearranging at times, where, it's just, okay, this whole section needs to come forward because it makes a lot more sense in terms of, like, how it starts and finishes if this whole section becomes more, front-ended. And then there were a few parts of the outline that really became very similar. And so I remember putting a couple of the chapters together in a way that I would have never expected, because, it was, some themes that just made more sense together than separate. And that also happened as I had other friends and colleagues read through it, where they said, these two things could probably, like, crunch down into one thing. So, just time to think about that. But all of that kind of thing happened once it was in a computer and an outline.
Wonderful. And then, so do you have any secrets for overcoming writer's block? Did you ever have that happen? I'm sure you did.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that with self-publishing versus publishing. That was one of the reasons I wanted to self-publish, because I wanted the freedom, the creative freedom, to be able to bypass writer's block when I needed to. And so there was one time where I had booked a hotel room to go do a writer's retreat, and I blocked my calendar to not do anything else that weekend. And I was just real done from a lot of other things going on in life and work at that moment. So I pushed it back a few weeks, and that was ultimately the better time to go do that work. So that's the first thing that comes to mind on that question, just giving yourself some ease and some scheduling freedom in order to ride the wave of the muse when it comes to you, instead of feeling like you have to force yourself to come up with something. So, and then, I kind of knowing yourself too well enough to know, am I a writing person in the morning or at night or in the middle of the day, so giving yourself that freedom, if you can, if you have that flexibility to get up really early or stay up really late some nights, to just meet yourself where you are best. And I'm a really early morning person. So some mornings I would get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and work on edits and shaping it, because I knew that was my best creative time. And then after that, my day, it starts real high and then it kind of simmers down. Whereas my husband's day, he takes off at 9 or 10 at night and he'll stay up till 3 in the morning working on a creative project. So,
Wow.
people are very different in that way. So knowing yourself well enough to know what you are.
Wow. Yeah, that's true. It's so important. I'm definitely a morning person myself as well. So
Yep.
I definitely, my writers group, I was on the West Coast and everybody else was like on the East Coast or Central Time. So yeah, I was like 7 a.m. Everybody else was like 10 o'clock and awake and everything. So yeah, fantastic. So as you were generating ideas, you probably had a lot of additional things that came up as you wrote, I'm imagining. And what did you do with those extra ideas that you found didn't quite fit into your outline or in the, I guess, the economy of what you wanted to have for your focused message for the book? Did you like turn them into blog posts? Did you just like cut them all entirely? What happened to those extra ideas?
I'm thinking about a second book. So there's that,
Okay.
just pushing those ideas into a second book altogether. And yeah, just the discipline of not putting too much in it, knowing it was meant to be a quick read, right? And so, yeah, there's that. But yeah, I'm working on a second book. I have reinvented a few of the themes to be more modular. I have written about them knowing I might do the same thing I did before, where I kind of take some of those blogs and articles and, push them into a second book after I've kind of lightly tested them and things and, just kind of marinated on them myself too. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to kind of think about all of our writing as authors, especially once, you're a first time author. I joked with a friend once that it's kind of like getting a tattoo where you have one and then you want to keep writing because it's craveable and, you're serving your audience really well, hopefully, and it's got the uptake that you're hoping for as you're writing. And so, I think just thinking about what those next books could be as you're writing the first one is a great idea.
You're not the first person to say that. It's like getting a tattoo. We'll
Oh,
come
really?
back to that another time. But
Yeah.
so this new book, you had this idea. Do you want to share the idea, or are you still kind of mulling it over?
I'm still mulling it over. Yeah, not
Okay.
quite yet, but
Okay. All right. But that's great. You had enough content. Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. So I want to go back to this idea of self-publishing for a minute. And you mentioned earlier that it was partly about flexibility. And even though you set your own deadlines, you didn't want to be maybe trapped by a publisher's deadlines, which was not my experience at all with working with my publisher. But are there any other reasons why you decided to self-publish? Was it financial reasons, like you wanted all of the revenue, or were there some other reasons too?
I was attracted to figuring out the system and how Amazon works in terms of working with Amazon primarily. Another thing worth pointing out is I was able to set up a series at the beginning, so the accountability to do a series, and I also named Desklight Books. So Amazon allows for you to actually start your own publishing company. And so because it was such a part and is such a part of the Desklight system of how we work with clients and things, I wanted to set that up. And so that was, of course, a benefit that I didn't see from talking with some other publishers along the way and learning from other authors who have published with publishing companies. Along with, avoiding writer's block, I think just pacing myself out and knowing that I could work at my own pace and think about things along the way that I needed to do in between, more important client projects that, I always have to think about that, or like I need to be serving my clients first and then working on these projects as a second. So I really wanted to make sure I could volumize that as the owner of the company. So those were things that were really important to me and drove those choices.
Okay, that's great. So marketing is a huge piece of any kind of book publishing. People don't always like to think about that, but it's if a book falls in a forest and no one's around to hear it, does it get published? Does it get read? And so I'm curious what your marketing strategies were for this book before, during, and after the process. And I know that I was inspired by your book launch party that you had. We talked about that a little bit to inspire my launch parties. And obviously you have client base. You probably have an email list existing and stuff too. But maybe you could talk about how you spread the word about your book.
Yeah. So Sarah on my team, she's our business manager and our marketing manager. So we worked on that a lot before the book launch and came up with some strategies and some ideas on, how to share on our social media channels for Desklight. And we also started something called Learner Leader Labs. And I would say, plug on this podcast, if anyone's interested as a learning leader, we have people from, big companies, big organizations, nonprofits, university faculty coming to these learner leader labs. And Michael, you were a guest at our inspiration hours that we had the last couple of years. And so the learning leader labs, we've had about 4 or 5 of them, and they're meant to take concepts from the book and workshop them in Moreau. So we come up with a board each time and everybody comes. We don't record them. It's really meant to be a very intimate group of learning leaders coming from different places, but we're all leaders and we're on the line to, teach people things. And everybody kind of shares around, concepts from the book, everything from, how do you help take field trips that are meaningful for adult learners as much as kids? How do you how do you do a great round of show and tell that can inspire a group of C-suite leaders at a big corporation? So taking some of these concepts around, another example is debriefing, doing an internal debrief as much as an external client debrief at the end, and just modeling out what's a good debrief look like. How do you really learn from each other and from about yourself so you can do it a little bit better and differently next time? And so we do these labs, and it's really a beautiful thing. They're just 45 minutes a month, and everyone comes and kind of talks through these concepts. So just love that because, it's taking the concepts from the book and bringing them out a little bit more for everybody to kind of talk about and think about. So that's been part of the strategy from the beginning.
Great. And when you say labs, you're talking like webinar style formats where people can join either live or it's pre-recorded. Is that?
Yeah, each one is live each month, and we send out a follow-up. So, folks that sign up will get the follow-up to say, here are the things we talked about. Here are the concepts. And then what's neat is we've made a worksheet for every single lab. So not only do you have that at the end to use for yourself, but you can use it with your team at your place of work or with, your students, whomever they are, to, put all of these ideas into practice.
That's great. All right. So I'm curious about what you learned about yourself through this process.
Oh, that's a good question. I learned a lot. I learned that it's very challenging to write a lot within a very constrained amount of time. I thought it would be, something that I would, enjoy the process of a little bit more. I found it really challenging because I'm more of a relationship person than a writer. And so I liked that I was able to flex into that, but it was really challenging for me. And I would say the heavy lift of writing a book, because I know there's a fear factor for a lot of people around like, oh my gosh, I couldn't write a book. And the way I am, I usually say, well, why not? Like, what's your barrier to entry there? How can you stay curious and open to the possibility of that and break it down into steps? So I humbly share, I realized, it's not an enjoyable process for me to write as I thought it could be or would be, because I'm a journaler. I love like reflecting on paper, but the formality of going through the edits and the constant revisions, it felt very different to me than like, say, a design project that's more visual. And of course, we go through rounds and rounds and revisions oftentimes. But that to me is a more enjoyable process than words on a page. So I learned that. I would have never known that really if I hadn't gone through that large of a process to write a book versus an article or a blog entry. And I've also learned on the flip side, I really enjoy talking about these concepts, hence the love letter idea. Like, I feel like it's an opportunity to share a lot of ideas and a lot of thinking before you really have a more enriched conversation with a person, because you've got all that stuff out of the way. Like you said, all of that, as this person you're meeting with has read the book, you're like, okay, we can kind of start from a medium or an advanced place versus a very, one-on-one level conversation about these topics, or, the possibilities that they have as a learning leader to grow and enrich themselves and their teams. So I find that to be really fun and beneficial. And that gets to my relational piece too, where I'm such a one-on-one person. I prefer one-on-one or small groups to, speaking in front of thousands of people. I just know that about myself. And so the book has benefited that level of, relational connection and capacity building that I really enjoy.
It's fantastic. And I like what you said also about the idea of revising and editing. You enjoyed that process. What was it about that process and that you enjoyed or liked about that? And also you mentioned, because you're self-published, you did mention that you hired an editor. So maybe you could talk about that a little bit. You brought in an editor to help you out. If you work with a traditional publisher, they already have their editors that are working with you. So maybe talk about that process. What was that like working with an editor?
Yeah, I hired her from a referral from a friend who had also worked with her before publishing her book. And it was, again, like an accountability system initially, just to kind of give me some milestones and some things to think about. She also is a very good resource for how to self-publish on Amazon. She knew how to do that. She gave me tips. It's a lot of steps that I realized I learned from this consultant. So it was great because she really upskilled me. She helped me to understand what I needed to think about, everything from, how to write your summary for Amazon, how to think about keywords for searches. That's really the reason to win on Amazon is, figuring out some of those keyword and topic areas to kind of migrate towards as a new author. Other things like other books to read that are a little bit like yours, so you can sort of speak about those and things like that. So she knew a lot about how Amazon works. She also helped me get in touch with book layout designers through some of the freelance websites. So I would have never really known that they existed on these sites. I always think about of course the short list of photographers and videographers and graphic designers, but that was new to me. So a person who can just get in there and figure out how many pages your book will be. Think about, do you want it to be soft cover, hardcover initially? How do you design for that? Of course, you can design for both eventually. Designers also on those sites to think about your design of your book, like where things go, where full bleeds can happen off the edges, where the trims will be. And I know enough about that stuff as a graphic designer to understand how to lay it out. So I laid some of it out, and then I had somebody else come in and make the Amazon rules make sense and be able to get through those vetting processes that Amazon has to get it approved through Amazon faster. So a lot of detail there, but I was really thankful for Melissa Wilson is her name. I was very thankful for her to educate me on those things and help me know that there were a lot of other people in the world who could be helpful at different parts of the process.
That's great advice, to remember that there are so many logistical and technical moving parts to this. It's not just the words, and it's not just checking for grammar and spelling and punctuation. There's the whole layout, and it's got to be an even number of pages, and what happens on an odd page, and the publishing. So even if you're self-publishing, you're still a printer, and you've got to manage all of that. So that's a lot of logistics to kind of keep in mind if you self-publish, right? Yeah. So what should new writers be prepared for as they work on their first book?
Yeah, we've covered writer's block, unexpected writer's block. I think that's definitely a big one. Another one is fear of failure, or fear of feeling like your words are already out there in the universe somewhere, said by someone else. And there's that it goes back to that idea of I think many creatives feel that way, whether you're an author, writer, or a visual designer, architect, even a musician. Just we get to this place as creative individuals where sometimes it's really hard to get past that fear factor of does it even matter? Am I putting something unique and interesting into the world? And I would say, yes, you are, bravely move through that and bridge through that to say you are a unique individual. You're a unique human, just like you're unique from anyone else in the world. And your work, your contribution is as unique as you are. And so, that to me is a big, big one where I've seen and talked to a lot of people who said, I started my book, I got through 300 pages and then I quit. Like, why did you quit? People want to read your book, So, so I would just encourage everybody who's listening to, push through that really hard stuff around fear factor and just, not feeling good enough. There's like, put it down for a few days, but don't give up. If you really want your words to be out there, there's definitely an audience for it, and just get the right group of people around you to encourage you and help shape what you're really looking to do and say.
That's great advice. Erin Huizenga, this has been a really great conversation talking about your first book and working together in our writers group and hearing your insights as a self-published author. This is really fantastic. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. And thanks for your, partnership, friendship in the writers group. And I'm so excited to do this and, of course, stay in touch on all of these different things that we're working towards.
Yeah. If people want to get a hold of you and see more about your work, what's the best way that they can do that?
Yeah. LinkedIn is always great. Erin Huizenga on LinkedIn. Desklightlearning.com is our website for Desklight. And book is on Amazon, Learning in the Wild. So if you do read it, I'd love to hear what you think and stay in touch.
That was a great conversation with Erin. And if there's one big takeaway, it's just this concept of writing a book as a love letter to your customers. What a great way to frame the why behind your work and your effort. It's fantastic. If you want to find out more about Erin's work or get a link to her book, you can check that out in our show notes. And if you're interested in writing your own nonfiction book in the future, check out my website, storytellingwithpurpose.com, where I have resources and links to an upcoming webinar about how to author your first nonfiction book. Until next time, I'm Michael Hernandez.